and welcome to the June committee meeting of fiscal affairs. I'll ask the secretary of the board to call attendance so we can make sure we have a quorum.
Okay, so CUNY TV, we are live. That's your cue. Members of the Board of Trustees, Committee on Fiscal Affairs, please respond present when you hear your name. Chairperson Ferrer.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Mujica. Not yet. Trustee Sunshine.
Present.
Trustee Berger.
Present.
Trustee and Professor John Berzani, welcome.
Present.
Great. Professor Benton, will he be joining us?
I thought so. I'm trying to
Okay,
contact
so
him.
we'll see what's going to be. The student rep Timothy Hunter, I don't see. Okay, and the student alternate Jonathan Hannon,
Present.
great. And I think Trustee Wilkins was going to be joining us. There she is.
Present.
Terrific. Okay, we have a quorum. This public committee on fiscal affairs is now called to order pursuant to the New York State Legislature's recent extension of the suspension of required in-person meetings under the open meetings law. This meeting is being held remotely via video conference with access to the public session available on the CUNY Board of Trustees website. A copy of the calendar and agenda of items is also available online at the CUNY Board of Trustees website. Additional items may be added during the meeting. And as a reminder, please mute so we can ensure that everyone can hear. I will now take a roll call attendance for members of the Chancellery and other invited guests. Members of the Chancellery and other invited guests, when you hear your name, please respond present. Chancellor Matos Rodriguez.
Happy to be here.
General Counsel and Senior Vice Chancellor for Legal Affairs, Derek Davis.
Present.
Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer, Hector Batista.
Presente.
Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost, Wendy Hensel.
Present.
Welcome. Interim Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer, Christina Chiappa.
Present.
Vice Chancellor Dorian Gloria.
Present.
And I see that we're joined by Senior Vice Chancellor Glenda Grace.
Present.
I'm going to add you. And President Carol Mason is the COPS liaison.
Present.
Terrific. Catherine Abada, the University Executive Budget Director.
Present.
And Jeanette Antonio, the Procurement Director at Lehman College. Nope. Howard Apson, the University Director of Environmental Health, Safety, and Risk Management. I don't see Howard yet. Mohammed Atala, the Vice Chancellor of Facilities Planning, Construction, and Management. Don't see Mohammed yet. Ron Bergman, Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at Lehman College.
Present.
Hey, Ron, it's been a long time. How are you?
Nice to see you.
William Choi is the Director of Supplier Diversity.
Present.
Catherine Cobb, Vice President of Finance at Baruch College.
Present.
James Haggard, the Deputy Chief Information Officer.
Present.
Fenwick Huss, the Provost at Baruch.
Present. Dean of Zicklin.
I'm sorry, I meant to say Dean of Zicklin. I read the wrong line. Somebody else's title. Bob Maruka, Associate University Provost for Planning.
Present.
Gwen Perlman, University Capital Budget Director.
Present.
Renee Rotolo, Vice President of Administration and Finance at Lehman College. I thought I saw Renee,
Yeah,
actually.
present.
Terrific. Jorge Silva Porras, the Interim Dean of the School of Professional Studies. Not yet. Martin Sturla, the Chief Procurement Officer for the university. Not yet. Okay. Ferdinand Verlet, Deputy University Capital Budget Director.
Present.
Terrific. David Wu, President of Baruch College.
Present.
Terrific. Thomas Zhao, the University Executive Treasurer.
Happy to be here.
Terrific. Edie Ruiz, from Lehman College.
Present.
Okay, great. And I think I saw somebody, Anjanette Antonio from
Present.
Lehman. Great. Okay, so we got the attendance taken. It's all you, Freddie.
Thanks, Gail. Let's turn to the item requiring a vote today. Given that all members are participating remotely via Zoom and we're unable to see everyone all at once, I'll announce the resolutions and ask for members to respond only if you'd like to abstain or oppose them, or of course, you'd like to ask a question. Otherwise, your vote will be recorded as a yes vote. If you're voting no or abstaining, please state your name and vote. Additionally, if you wish to second an item or have any questions or comment, please state your name first for the record, and let's try to avoid speaking over one another. Action item 1A is the approval of the minutes of the April 25th, 2022 meeting. I'll move the item. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Is there any discussion, any additions to the minutes? Hearing none, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose. The minutes are unanimously approved. Thank you. I'd
Freddie,
like to know-
sorry to interrupt. I just want to note the presence, especially for voting, of trustee Mohica has joined us.
Ah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we've all we passed the minutes unanimously. I'd like to address item B, the policy calendar. Item 1B, 1A is a resolution to authorize the procurement of Cisco software and hardware from Coronet for upgraded network performance to support HyFlex classroom upgrades. As part of Lehman College's Network Digital HyFlex Classroom Initiative, the college will undergo an upgrade to their computer network infrastructure platform and switching environment to support the bandwidth, resiliency, and security requirements of Lehman's upgrade of 176 HyFlex classrooms, lecture halls, meeting rooms. Lehman College has selected Coronet, an MWBE vendor, to provide the resources required for this project. University is requesting the Board of Trustees authorize Lehman College to procure Cisco hardware and software from Coronet at an estimated cost not to exceed $1,806,017. Lehman College's Vice President of Finance and Administration, Renee Rotolo, and Chief Information Officer, Ronald Bergman, are available to provide further background on this item if required. Is there anyone from the Chancellery who would like to make a statement before we do that?
Yeah, Freddie, Hector. The only statement I want to make is when we were trying to move the HyperFlex program forward, it was during a time, as you know, that we were in the middle of the thick of COVID, and some of the items that we're discussing here with you today is one of those items that we miss, right? This whole notion of upgrading that needed to happen, and because of that is an item that's being brought forward to the board, and so I wanted to make sure that that's the reason why we sort of have taken this on right now.
Thank you, Hector. I'll move the item. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Now, discussion and questions on the item. Anyone from the committee? I'll just make one comment, and I appreciate, Hector, your candor in making that statement. I think it would be useful going forward to have a sense of what the continuity of these procurements tends to be, and how this will affect all of our operations going forward. Are there any other questions from the committee?
I'd ask a question.
Sure, trustee.
I was under the impression, and I didn't double check, that when we approved a high flex purchase before, there was around this amount of dollars left for for exactly this purpose. So did we discuss this particular acquisition earlier? When the high flex purchase for Lehman was discussed, and I see the members from Lehman here to answer that.
Well, I would certainly defer to them. My recollection is we did not. And that created more than a little bit of confusion, but do the folks from Lehman want to respond to that?
This is Eddie Ruiz. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Information Technology. I can take on that question. So the previous procurement for the high flex front end equipment for the classroom themselves was part of FY22. This particular purchase procurement is approved for in the CUNY plan for FY23. So the way that we have to see what we're doing with classroom here at Lehman is building an audio and visual infrastructure, which requires a network classrooms instead of being standalone. So these equipment that we want that we have here in this resolution is to upgrade the closet, the equipment that is needed to provide more bandwidth to the classroom themselves. So this was a phase 2. I hope that answered your question.
I think Professor Bazzani was asking a different question, but let Professor Bazzani ask the question.
Yeah, I apologize for not going back to the prior meeting, but my understanding was there was another part that was going to come back in terms of this large scale acquisition. There was a hardware part that was totaling about, I don't know, I want to say 15 million. And then there was $2 million of some sort of software connectivity that was not without an identified vendor. And if I recall correctly, we had a discussion about that. And I was under the impression that this was a resolution of that discussion. And I'm just looking for confirmation.
I believe you are talking about the service component of the classroom, of the installation, and that was all part of the first resolution. This is different, and we are using OGS contract for this procurement.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
So then this was unanticipated in the first phase, right?
I'm so unanticipated.
Yeah. Or else we would have discussed it in the first phase.
Well, and I will ask my colleagues from Lehman if they want to add to this, but go ahead. I think that
I'm going to jump in because actually the first phase was anticipated. It was just for the equipment necessary to set up the classrooms to get that going. Because we knew there was going to be a longer process in that, if you recall at the time, sourcing materials and actually getting materials was way behind schedule. Because of the quantity of classrooms, we knew we wanted to focus on getting the classrooms going first before we then started to attack the network. So when we laid out a plan to CUNY for spending our federal stimulus dollars, we planned on these different phases, and we've actually done some of the upgrades that were below the threshold of having to go to the board for approval. It's this section now that we're at, the threshold is above the 1 million, so we are actually coming to the board for this aspect of the network upgrade. But we always laid out this project in phases. We just didn't have the dollars associated with it when we went to the board the first time.
And you didn't describe the phases.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you're right, that we, and I apologize, that
this was intended to be two parts. The first part was the front end for the classrooms themselves. And this is the back end for the network infrastructure to support the classrooms. And what's critical is that all of this network infrastructure is at end of life and is no longer supported by the vendor. So it's an important security issue as much as anything else. However, to the point that you're making, it wasn't clear enough, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, but look, I think that at the end of the day, Trustee Farrar, I think it's really, as we were, some of our classrooms, we were trying to build this program. Some of our classrooms just didn't have the infrastructure that we needed. So we learned a lot through that process. We were anticipated that we were going to have these challenges, and that's what we're having. Normally, that's not the way we would sort of lay that out, but I think that that's unfortunately the way we had to lay it out because of what we were trying to deal with at that given time. And I think that's an important distinction.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Freddie.
Trustee Sunshine.
This brings up, and I don't want to pick on Lehman because it is what it is and it makes sense. But the whole area of technology is just constant frustration. And part of it, and in fairness to every one of the schools, we have a very old series of colleges, all of which are probably behind the times when it comes to technological advances, which change every couple of months. But I've got to say, on this committee, this is among the more frustrating topics that keeps coming up. And I know, Hector, you spend an enormous amount of time trying to put some sense into this, but I guess there's an overall problem here having to do with technological changes. And if it goes up above a certain number, that comes to our committee. But somehow we need to do better in terms of presenting this, I think. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm suggesting, but I am bringing to light, I think, something that's shared by the members of the committee, that technology is a particularly difficult topic. And we, in a piecemeal basis, we get hit with significant amounts of money for individual colleges. And I guess I would like at some point to try to have this done in a more organized manner, CUNY-wide.
Our Chief Operating Officer, I believe, wants to be recognized.
Thank you. Trustee Sunshine, you're absolutely right. As you know, as you probably heard, we recently completed a search for our next CIO. I think as part of that process is a lot of work that the university has undertaken connected to sort of bringing us to the cloud and really modernizing our system. So that's sort of one component of it. But I think the most important component that you're addressing is how we sort of presenting a strategy for technology for the university, right? And frankly, as some of you know, without getting into any details, we sort of learned that we're strong as our weakest link. And so we have to sort of tighten up, tighten up our network. But more importantly, I think we need to present, and the board is owed, a real plan on where we're heading with technology, you know, where we are, where we're heading, and where we want to be. And I think that is definitely something that's coming, and something that is a point well taken. Furthermore, I think that when it comes to these, I know that, you know, we're all tired of talking about COVID, but COVID created unusual situations as we were trying to respond to an ever-changing environment. And I think some of those things sort of, that's not an excuse, sort of got caught up in that. And I think this is an example of that. But I think the overall point that you're making is there needs to be a more coordinated effort across the university, and the board and the board deserves to get that. And I think it's something that I'm committed to bringing forward to the board.
Fair enough. Thank you for your honesty and frankness. That's all we'd expect. Let's really do this now, because it's source of continuing frustration that we're presented piecemeal with significant amounts of allocations, and it's piecemeal. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Is there anything else? Any further comment? If there is none, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose.
Wilkin will be abstaining.
Okay. Anyone else? Item 1B, 1A passes. Thank you very much. Item 1B, 2A is a resolution to authorize the renewal of university enterprise licenses for Adobe Creative Cloud and Document Cloud software. Adobe products, including Adobe Creative Cloud, is utilized by 31,603 faculty and staff. University also has 27,000 student licenses and utilizes Adobe products on shared device licenses for labs and classrooms. The current enterprise term license agreement for Adobe is set to expire in August 2022. The university has selected Dell Marketing to enter into a new 3-year agreement, which maintains the terms of the current agreement and meets the stated requirements conveyed by campuses. The university is requesting Board of Trustees to authorize a contract with Dell Marketing to provide Adobe for an amount not to exceed $4,395,225 over a period of 3 years. Deputy Chief Information Officer James Haggard is available to provide further background if required. I'll move the item. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Is there any discussion or are there any questions on item 1B2A? Hearing none, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose.
Wilkin abstain.
Okay. This item 1B2A is approved. Thank you. Item 1B2B is a resolution to authorize a contract with Safety Stratus Incorporated to provide a chemical tracking software solution. The university hosts over 500 laboratories and chemical storage locations containing over 35,000 chemicals, with over 900 researchers, professors, technicians, students, and related support staff. As required by the Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act, as well as other local, state, and federal laws, CUNY is required to properly manage the university's chemical inventory and safety data sheets and ensure their availability and accuracy. The university's current contract is set to expire in October of this year. Following an RFP issued by the university, CUNY has selected a chemical inventory software management and vendor, Safety Stratus, to perform these tracking services. The university is requesting the Board of Trustees authorize a contract with Safety Stratus Incorporated to provide chemical tracking software and make expenditures and purchases under said contract not to exceed $625,000 over a period of 5 years. University Director of Environmental Health, Safety, and Risk Management, Howard Absan, is available to provide further background on this item if you require it. I'll move the item. Is there a second?
Hannan, second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or are there any questions on this item?
I just wanted the records to show that on this particular item, we're saving about $250,000 to the university. It's 29% lower than the previous contract.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you want to abstain or oppose.
Once again, Wilkin, I need to abstain.
Okay. This item is approved. Item 1B2C is a resolution to authorize the renewal of a contract with CPS HR Consulting to provide continued access to the Exams Express platform to administer civil service exams. The City University of New York is a civil service entity recognized by the state of New York, and it must comply with civil service hiring process and requirements. Exams Express, an online civil service exam system portal, was developed and integrated into the university's HR information technology framework and has been maintained by CPS HR Consulting after it was selected through a competitive public solicitation process in 2002. The university would like to award a single source contract to CPS for continued access to Exams Express and continued maintenance. The university requires continuous access to Exams Express to maintain civil service exam administration operations, and CPS uniquely possesses a bank of exams that cover the university's wide range of civil service titles that have been customized over the years to meet CUNY's requirements. Universities requesting the Board of Trustees authorize a contract with CPS HR Consulting not to exceed $1,422,321 over a period of 4 years. Vice Chancellor for Human Resources, Dorian Gloria, is available to provide further background on this item if required. I'll move the item. Is there a second?
Berger, second.
Any discussion or questions on this item?
Mr. Chair,
Trustee Berger,
how many civil service exams are we giving over a period of time, a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Ms. Gloria, that's a question for you.
It will change depending on the year and the schedule, but it is approximately between 10 and 15.
10 and 15 exams. Is that what you said?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I get the import of your question, Trustee Berger. If we divided this number by the number of exams given, the type of exam, not the number of individual exams, is pretty expensive. Is there a reason why we're going sole source here other than to avoid re-specifying this entire item?
So the number of exams that we give each year are dependent on a number of things. We could do more of them if we have the resources to run them. The main reason is because right now we are running a very aggressive schedule, or trying to amp up our aggressive schedule, because we are in a settlement agreement with DC 37, which requires us to meet certain milestones over the next year or two. If we were to move to a new vendor, we would have to create the system, and that would mean taking the system down for a period of time. We wouldn't be able to stay in compliance with that settlement agreement. Over 20 years that we have worked with them, we have integrated their system into ours. So that is not so easily done. There's no price escalation involved over the 4 years. And we certainly can look at the end of the 4 years to do a more competitive bid if it seems that it is appropriate at that time.
Is that satisfactory, Trustee Berger?
Yes, it is. Look, I understand the complexities of the civil service system, and if we're doing our 10 or 15, that's $25,000, $30,000 per exam, depending on the number of people who are taking it. It's outrageous, but not outrageous under the circumstances.
Thank you.
Okay. Is everyone else
Trustee
Satisfied?
Trustee Frere, the student rep,
Ah,
Jonathan.
Mr. Hannon, I'm sorry, I did not see the yellow hand against the white of your background.
That's all right. So I wanted to say something that's similar to the last thing that Trustee Berger said just now about the number of people that take the examinations. Do we have a figure for what is the average number of people who take each of these civil service examinations?
I do not have that handy. I can certainly get it if it is desired. It varies quite a bit. What we are finding is, unfortunately, that in areas that are short, for example, public safety, that the number of people who are taking the exams are going down, and that is something that we are working on outside, of course, of the software request.
And also, we have some trades that we're really struggling with, and in the world that we're in, connected to COVID, that we're struggling trying to fill those trades. So I think it sort of addressed some of the Trustee Berger's concerns. I mean, we understand the cost, but the reality is that we have some lists that have expired. We have some real challenges and needs across the university when it comes to some of these trades.
Mr. Hannon, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, further to their questions, can I ask whether over the next year or two, we'll be looking at rebidding these contracts?
We can certainly do that. The issue that we have had thus far has been that no other provider seems to have the breadth and scope of the offerings that they do. But of course, we can certainly look at that before the expiration of this contract, if approved.
Okay. All right. If there's no other question or concern, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose. This item passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 1B2D is a resolution to authorize a contract with Cooling Guard Mechanical Corporation to provide ongoing maintenance and required repairs of HVAC systems. CUNY currently leases office space at 8 locations throughout New York City, all of which require maintenance and repairs of the heat, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. The current contract to provide HVAC services is set to expire in September of this year, following an invitation for bid. I'm sorry? Following an invitation for bids, CUNY has selected Cooling Guard Mechanical Corporation to provide monthly maintenance, preventive maintenance at the locations, and as needed, repairs on a time and material basis. The university is requesting the Board of Trustees authorize a contract with Cooling Guard Mechanical Corporation for an amount not to exceed $558,668 over a period of 2 years. Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer Hector Batista is available to provide further background on this item if required. Does anyone here require it? Then I'll move the item. May I have a second?
And in second.
Any further discussion? If there is none, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose.
Wilkin will abstain.
Okay. With one abstention, item 1B2D is approved. Item 1B2E is a resolution to authorize a contract with Complete Books and Media Supply Incorporated for online and print books and other related services. As a member of the Education and Institutional Cooperative Services Incorporated, a purchasing consortium, the university would like to leverage an existing E&I agreement currently in place with Complete Books and Media Supply Incorporated and MWBE for online and print books, subscription management, multimedia products, and other related products and services. The E&I Consortium contracts offers more advantageous pricing, and the university has negotiated a discount structure that is higher than discounts available through the State of New York Office of General Service Contracts. Complete Book and Media Supply Incorporated is also ready to participate in the new e-procurement transformation project that is currently underway excuse me, at CUNY. The university is requesting the Board of Trustees authorize a contract with Complete Book and Media Supply Incorporated to make purchases under the existing E&I Consortium contract for an estimated annual aggregate spend under the member-specific agreement of $3 million a year for an amount not to exceed $11,500,000 over the term of the agreement, and for an amount not to exceed $15 million for the 5-year renewal term of the agreement. Director of Supplier Diversity, William Choi, is available to provide further background information if you require it. I will only have one question. I think I understand what I just read, but what is the initial term of the agreement? That's not specified here.
Sure. So the initial term of the agreement will be upon registration when we register the contract with the state comptroller, and that will end coterminous with the contract term, the E&I contract term. So whenever we get it registered, and that will be the start date, and it will end on April 30th, 2026.
Oh, okay. So it's essentially a little under 4 years.
Yes.
All right. That's good to know, because we make reference to participating in e-procurement project. How does that fit in this?
If I may, Trustee Ferrer, what that means is that they have already developed a catalog that is fully compatible with the system that we are in under implementation. So once the CUNY buy, as we call it, the e-procurement system goes live, we can very easily connect their catalog, so we can have and be part of the marketplace. So anyone that needs to buy books, then you can they'll go into our e-procurement platform and buy books in an Amazon-like experience.
All right. Professor Berzani had his hand up, and then Chief Operating Officer Batista.
Thank you. I'm asking for some clarification. I initially thought this was related to library acquisitions, but when reaching out, I understand that it's not, and I'm wondering what is the market for these books in terms of CUNY? Is it in classroom materials? Is it some other use? Is it administrative materials?
It's a mixture of both, right? So we're kind of collapsing whatever we can in terms of a book reseller. The libraries sometimes will require physical processing, where they require a certain book to have a jacket, a code, and whatnot. And that's not covered under this particular contract or this agreement. So we're trying to collapse all of the other spend for administrative offices, for certain textbooks that we can buy, where they can be, where they're basically resellers. So everything else pretty much, except for the libraries that require some sort of physical processing.
Thank you.
Okay, Hector Batista is next.
The only thing I wanted to add is the board recall, this was part of, we had brought to the board the whole Jaeger contract, which is part of the sort of CUNY buy. And at the end of the day, what this is going to do for the university is it's going to allow us to be more nimble and be able to really, through economy of scale, be able to allow our campuses to be able to procure items through, assuming that they have the budget, through just going online and checking things out. So this is the beginning of many other contracts you're gonna see going forward, but the idea is to create this, and I know the chancellor doesn't like us using this, sort of a almost similar mini kind of Amazon sort of situation here at CUNY that allows us to really be more efficient in terms of procuring for our campuses to procure.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Then I'll move the item. Is there a second?
Berger, second.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose.
Wilkin will abstain.
Okay. With one abstention, this item is approved. Item 1B2F is a resolution to authorize a contract with Safe and Sound Armored Courier for armored car services. The university requires armored vehicles and armored courier services to transport cash from college bursar offices to their depository institutions. The university's current contract for armored car services will expire in August 2022. Following an RFP, the university has selected Safe and Sound Armored Car Services to provide these services. The university is requesting the board authorize a contract with Safe and Sound Armored Car Services with costs not to exceed $1,240,160,025 over a period of 5 years. University Executive Treasurer Thomas Zhou is available to provide further background if required. Is there anyone? Trustee Berger. Unmute, please. Henry, you're muted.
I noticed that only one vendor responded to the RFP. Is that because of a lack of vendors, which I can't imagine? I see these trucks running around the city all the time. Or are our requirements so unique that nobody wants to deal with us? What's the story?
There's not an easy answer for that. The reality is, there are not that many companies. You know, there are 2 or 3 other companies that they show some interest, but they took exceptions to the terms. And so, unfortunately, once they take exceptions and they don't accept, you know, the terms of there weren't really any restrictive requirements that I can think of that could have. It's somewhat unusual, but it's not something that we haven't seen before. I hope that answers your question.
How does the cost of this contract compare to the contract that's expiring?
It's fairly similar.
In what respect?
It's similar and means that it's between 2 and 3% up, you know, considering the you know, cost going up, gas and stuff. But so it's I haven't seen an uptick in the cost, considering that it's only been one response.
Okay. Does that answer your question, trustee?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else? Well, I'll move the item. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Is there any further discussion on the item? Hearing none, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose.
Mr. Trustee Wilkin will abstain.
Okay. With one abstention, item 1B2F is approved. Thank you. Item 1B3A is a resolution to revise the tuition schedule for spring 2023 to include a non-resident online degree program tuition category and an online infrastructure fee for all fully online programs at the university. In order to standardize tuition and fee rates for students across the university is proposing a revision to the schedule of tuition for fully online degree programs for non-resident students effective spring 2023 at 1.2 times the resident tuition rate for online undergraduate and graduate degree programs at the university's senior colleges and graduate and professional schools. The university is also requesting Board of Trustees extend the online infrastructure fee of $75 per semester to all fully online degree programs at the university beginning for the spring 2023 semester. Interim Dean of the School of Professional Studies, Jorge Silva Puras, Interim CFO, Christina Chapa, and Associate Provost, Robert Maruca, will be performing a presentation on this topic and are available upon its conclusion to answer your questions.
Christina, did you need to be able to put something on the screen?
Please. Yeah.
So,
See, there's a question. Should we wait on it or?
Let's see the full presentation before we do questions.
Okay, so you should be able to do that now.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Good. Thank you. All right. So thank you so much. I just want to take everyone through a couple of slides, which I hope will clarify how we got to the point of the resolution. And I want to thank my partners in this, the Dean of the TPS, Jorge Silva Puras, and Bob Maruca, who is Associate Provost in the Office of Academic Affairs. And I also want to thank the University Executive Treasurer who's here, Thomas Zhao, and his team to doing the benchmark for this presentation. So quickly, I'm just going to give a little background of where we are and how we got there. We're going to discuss some benchmarking and a summary. So to begin with, I just want to, one of the big initiatives that CUNY has announced recently is an online program initiative. And kind of in conjunction, and we were already starting to look at some of the things, what we decided to do was take a look of how our tuition fee pricing for these fully online programs compared to our peers, so that when we really enter the market, or at least expand the market as we're proposing, that we have the appropriate tuition fee pricing. And what we found when we looked through and saw where our tuition fee pricing was, we found that we were inconsistent, right? So we have 3 big colleges who have the vast majority of our fully online degree programs. And all 3 of those colleges had gone to the board and asked for specific special pricing for their programs. They asked for in-state tuition, and they also asked for a $75 per semester online infrastructure fee. So all the other colleges who have fully online programs, and there's not a lot right now, actually, or for those non-resident students who are taking those fully online programs, they charge the regular non-resident rate. So there is an inconsistency that we have that has happened. And I think what we wanted to do was just to make sure, one, that we had the standardized pricing, and also to determine what that pricing should be. And that's why we end up doing some benchmarking on that. So just a couple other principles, when we're going through the review to see where we should be, I already mentioned, we wanted to make sure that our tuition fee pricing was consistent among the colleges. We also wanted to make sure that we were competitively priced in the market. We wanted to make sure that our costs were covered. And also we wanted to recognize that the additional program costs that we would be incurring to make sure that these fully online programs were at the quality that we wanted them to be, and that those online degree students had the appropriate technology and support. So that was kind of a basis for our review. So I just wanted to give a little bit of information of where we are right now. And there is definitely a fluctuation from this. We have another colleges that have this after fall 2021, but this is what we were fall 2021. We have about 4,866 students and 60 fully online programs. And I wanted to show you how that broke out by senior college. So as I mentioned before, there are really three main colleges that have the bulk of the fully online programs. And you can see from the chart here, it's really the School of Professional Studies, School of Public Health, and John Jay. And Lehman and Medgar Evers has some programs as well, but we do expect to see a lot of growth in this area. So first, I just want to start off. So when we looked at the various pricing, we looked at three different kind of groups. We looked at undergraduate at four-year colleges, we looked at graduate programs, and then we looked at associate programs at community colleges. So I just wanted to start by showing just what our current pricing is for the undergraduate tuition. And what I just wanted to mention here is that New York State residents will pay the New York State resident fee tuition, irregardless of whether they're in traditional or fully online programs. So the first slide just shows, so we did benchmarking in a couple of ways, and you'll see that in this presentation. One of the things we did is we actually went onto all the, a bunch of colleges' websites to look at their different pricing. And then we also used iPads, which is a report that we have to, all college universities have to report data in the iPad system. And depending on what we're looking for, those were our main two sources. So here you can see we just benchmarked the undergraduate tuition at our senior colleges. The lighter blue, the lighter blue is our non-resident, and the darker blue is our resident. So I just wanted to show that. And then we also looked at how CUNY's resident rate versus their non-resident rate, what were the differentials? And the reason we were looking at these is because, and you'll see in the next slide, is we found that most of the time, the pricing that we found for fully online programs or non-resident students were somewhere in the middle between the resident and the non-resident rate. And that's really shown on this slide. And what this slide is showing is that for most of the colleges that we sampled, we found that non-resident students in these fully online degree programs paid an average of 1.7 times the resident in-state rate, right? And for SUNY, we also benchmarked them because, they're our friends up north, they had a 1.2 times the resident rate. So that's kind of our conclusions, what we saw on the undergraduate side. For the graduate programs, we sampled about 30 different colleges and universities, around the country. We found a lot of the same price differentials. Again, for non-resident students who are fully online programs, the pricing was in between the resident and non-resident rate. So we found that per credit, we found an average of 1.4 times. And we also found that SUNY, similar to how they price their programs in undergraduate programs, also had the same 1.2 times the resident rate for the graduate programs. And finally, for community colleges, we've actually found something very different. So for the most of the community colleges we sampled, again, both in New York State and around the country, we found that they didn't actually differentiate at all. So a non-resident student in a fully online program at a community colleges paid the same as a non-resident student that's taking in a traditional modality. And that really residency rules there. And then we moved to fees. So what we did is we looked at fees at both CUNY and then some of those sample institutions we were talking about. So this really represents one semester, 12 credits. You know, a lot of other college universities actually charge a rate per credit for fees as opposed to by semester. And we looked at CUNY, and the lighter blue is the total fees that these CUNY and the institution charge, and the darker blue is really just the fees specific to online. So you can see here how CUNY really falls into place with some of our competitors, different colleges around the university. So I think I mentioned that, you know, when John Jay School of Professional Studies and the Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy, when they went and asked for different pricing for the fully online programs for their non-degree students, they also asked for a $75 per semester charge, was called the online infrastructure fee. So I just wanted to show here, we had asked all those colleges, what do they spend those funds on? And we just wanted to list so you kind of get an idea of some of the types of mostly services that are provided with this additional fee. And so finally, just a couple of conclusions. One, based on all the data that we looked at, we found that charging in-state rates for fully online degree programs for non-resident students were generally not consistent with what our peers did. And we also found that they charge typically somewhere between the resident and non-resident rates. So if you recall, for undergrad student, that average was 1.7, and SUNY was 1.2 times the resident rate. We also did some pricing studies with our internal data to determine what would be the correct cost per credit to charge to ensure that we were at least fully covering our costs. And so that also, you know, confirms that the pricing that we're going to recommend was the right pricing. We also found that charging for community colleges, charging the non-resident rate for our fully online degree programs is actually consistent with our peers. So there does not appear to be a difference between whether a non-resident student is taking a degree fully online versus hybrid in person. And that also, when you see our recommendation, that also the data that we did, the analysis we did on the costing also confirms, you know, we're in a bright spot. And generally, the third thing is that our tuition fees are generally low compared to our peers. So I know this is a lot, but so we're really proposing a couple things here. One is that we create a new tuition category for non-resident students who are in these fully online programs. And that for both senior colleges and graduate professional schools, and that pricing is 1.2 times the full-time resident rate. We're proposing that those changes happen starting in the spring 2023 semester, but we are requesting because there will be students who are impacted by this at John Jay, SPS, and School of Public Health, those non-resident students, that students who will be currently enrolled in those programs will have the differential that waived until they either graduate or leave the program. And the final thing that we are recommending is that we extend the $75 per semester online infrastructure fee that's currently charged at the three colleges, SPS, John Jay, and Graduate School of Public Health, to the remainder of the fully online degree programs at the university. So just finally, just to give you a sense of how these numbers look, if you look at our undergraduate degree rate, the current rate per semester is 305. The non-resident rate is 620, and what we're proposing is the 350 again. And then for just the Masters of Arts and Science and also advanced certificates, you can see the pricing here for the resident, both online and traditional, non-resident, and where the 1.2 shakes out if we do the 1.2 for those non-residents and fully online degrees. And I think that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing. Give me a second. And that concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, Chancellor Matos would like to make a comment, so let's go to the Chancellor first.
Thank you. And I just want to provide the additional context that and the appreciation to this committee, because it was a recommendation of this committee based on reviewing a couple of cases that we come up and suggest a policy that was uniform across the system, that look at best practices and the state of the market in other programs. And that was competitive, but also that it allows to sort of also cover our costs. So I want to thank the committee for that recommendation. And I also want to thank CFO Chiapa and Dean Silva Puras from SPS, Bob Maruca, former Provost Dan Lemons, and Hector, who worked hard in putting this proposal for the committee today. I just wanted to provide that historical context.
Thank you, Chancellor. Next is Trustee Berger and then Professor Benson. Oh, and then, I'm sorry, and then Mr. Hannan.
I appreciate the work of the committee. I think this is very helpful. I'm just unclear about one thing. What are we proposing for fully online community college programs?
So we're proposing no change to their tuition and fees. So if you're an out-of-state student, resident students, there will be no change. Actually, both of them, you'll have no change. So if you're a resident student, community colleges, you'll pay the same tuition fees that you do now, whether you're fully online or in person. And same thing with the non-resident, if you're fully online or if you're in person. But if you're fully online, we're proposing that you will be charged the $75 per semester online infrastructure fee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Trustee?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, I see Professor Benton had a question. I guess not. Mr. Hannan has a question.
Yes, I have a question regarding the fees that these fully online students are already paying. So the fully online students are already paying some fees, such as the student activity fee and the student technology fee. So many things that they're paying for with those fees are for services that are being provided to in-person students. So is there any plan for the current structure of the student activity fee to be modified such that online students are going to be benefiting from the student activity fees that they're paying, and similarly for their student technology fee?
Well, I think the first question is, are these student activity fees or there's something else? I was going to ask that question at the end of it, but might as well answer it now.
I could start answering if anyone wants to chime in, that'd be great. So we are not, so the student activity fees are fees that are determined, the amounts of the fees are determined at the college based on the goods and services that the student activities fees provide. So we're not making any changes at this point on the student activity fees. Or the tech fees, right? So we're just adding the the online infrastructure fee to pay for these additional costs that are incurred to make sure that those students have the proper technology and support.
So that would be something that would have to be handled on a local campus level at a later time?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
you're correct. Yeah, thank you.
So for the purposes, of course, of clarity, these fees will be banked, for want of a better term, at the colleges and accounted for and expended how?
How meaning, so the students will be billed, right, the $75, right, that will be collected.
Mhm.
And they'll spend it through the system.
Spend it on what?
Christina, in the case of SPS at least,
Thank
the activity fee is collected and is deposited into a special account that is decided on how to spend those funds by a committee that is in its majority composed of students. So it is the students who decide, do they want new computers or they want a new system? The technology fee is to cover, as Christina mentioned, the online tutoring services, the tech support, the online advising and others. But the activity per se is typically managed primarily by request of the students.
Okay. I see Trustee Sunshine has his hand up.
What is the overall financial implication of these changes? I mean, are we going to be taking less money in, I guess? I mean, there's got to be some, if we enact this, what's the overall effect?
Well, for the majority of the students, so the majority of our fully online students are at the 3 colleges, John Jay, SPS, Graduate School of Public Health. And right now, those non-resident students pay the in-state rate. So that's one of the reasons why we allow them a waiver until this rate goes ahead, because there will be more fees, right? So we're proposing that instead of charging the in-state rate, that they're going to charge 1.2 times the resident rate.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But how much? So does more come in or less come in?
So
Oh, sorry.
go, Christina.
No.
So the fees before, since we didn't have a large number of these fully online programs, I guess was discounted a bit more because they were trying to get a foot into the market, right? As now that we grow in the number of programs, we become a much more mature operation, it was appropriate, and given the charge of this committee to find a uniform policy for the university, to find something that was competitive. And we think that we find that price point we suggest here, but more in accordance with industry practices. So what you had before was a number of initial programs coming before the board and trying to get a foothold, if you wish, right? And we feel that has been already established, right? And then the second, there was a sense from this committee and the board that we didn't want to continue looking at these things one by one, that we want to create a uniform policy. I don't know if that answers your question, Trustee Sunshine.
It does. I mean, I guess, but the bottom line is, are we going to be taking more money in or less money in, or do we not know?
Well, we certainly hope that we will with the investment, particularly in CUNY Online. We're going to have a lot more fully online offerings compared to what we have now. So this should really become helping us to generate additional revenue moving forward.
Yeah, I think it will.
Yep.
The whole world is changing.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Good.
Good. If there's no other discussion on this, I'll move the item. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Any further discussion? Anything else on this? If there is nothing. Now we'll vote. Please only respond. Again, if you'd like to abstain or oppose.
Wilkin abstain.
Okay. With one abstention, Trustee Sunshine, I see your hand still up. You're muted.
Sorry, that's from before. I'm voting for.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, there's one abstention. This item passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Policy item 1B3B is a resolution to authorize an academic excellence fee for Baruch College's online MBA program. Baruch College, in the interest of full disclosure, my alma mater, is planning to offer an online MBA starting spring 2023 in order to ensure the same quality is delivered to students enrolled in the online MBA as those enrolled in the traditional MBA program. And in order to generate sufficient revenue to cover online operating costs, Baruch College is requesting an academic excellence fee. Baruch College is requesting the Board of Trustees approval to adopt an online MBA AEF of $120 per semester beginning in the spring of 2023. President David Wu, Provost Fenwick Huss, and Vice President of Finance Catherine Cobb are available to provide any further background on this. President Wu, is there anything you wish to say on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Ferreira. I just want to provide a little bit of a context. This online MBA program has been conceived more than 3 years ago. There is, as you know, a very competitive market for online graduate and professional education. And given that we have a nationally ranked MBA program, it's important for us to enter the online market. Some of the policies that was recently passed, including at this meeting, one is the academic excellence fee policy that was passed in the last board meeting, and the online tuition and fee policy that was just passed just now, and also the emergence of the CUNY Online initiative started by the central office. And all these development made our proposal of this program significantly simplified. We're just basically following the established policy and the platform of CUNY Online to launch this program. We are certainly very excited and enthusiastic about this program, and hope to make the same kind of a market impact as our traditional MBA program has been. Thank you.
Thank you, President Wu. I saw Mr. Hannon's hand up.
So I had a question regarding the academic excellence fees of this program compared to the regular program. I see the academic excellence fees for the MBA program are, if you're part-time or if you're full-time, a fixed rate, but the academic excellence fees proposed here are per credit. So how does that equate to being 10% more than the standard academic excellence fee of the traditional MBA?
Yes, I'll start the answer. I'll invite Dean Fenwick Huss to jump in with more details. And so the fee that we're charging for the online program is slightly higher than the traditional program because of the higher demand that would be required on this in terms of the student services and the student engagement and the career services and so on. So all these services are provided in an online format that we currently do not exist, and also will require a higher level of service to be provided. And so we believe that 10% differential would help us to cover that cost difference. Fenwick, you have anything to add?
Yeah, if you look at the total cost of the AEF over the entire program, for the current program, it's $52.50. For the proposed online, it's $57.75. So it's just over $500 difference on the whole program for the students.
And another reason when we charge this per credit basis is in terms of the fee, that if the student takes the last number of credits a given semester, their fee would be less as well. So that's the rationale behind the per credit charge rather than a flat fee for the whole for any semester.
So again, for clarity, it is not $120 per semester, it's $120 per credit per semester.
Correct.
Okay. Professor Bazzani had his hand up.
Yes, so with the academic excellence fees, there's an accounting of their expenses. There's also this newly proposed or newly passed academic technology, or let me get it right, infrastructure fee. Is it going to be difficult for Baruch to decouple those two expenses? It sounded like what you were describing earlier might have been paid for out of the infrastructure fee and not out of an academic excellence fee.
No, in our case, the majority of our academic excellence fee were devoted toward staffing costs, and so while the online infrastructure fee has a much narrower focus. So there is at the policy definition, there is a fairly clear difference between the two. So I believe we will be able to keep track of both and reporting that on an annual basis as the policy dictates in a very clear fashion.
Trustee Bazzani, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hannan.
Yes, my question wasn't necessarily answered, because if we're talking about somebody who's doing the full-time MBA online, as opposed to someone who's doing the full-time MBA in person, currently the full-time MBA in person has an academic excellence fee of $1,000, whereas if we equate the full-time MBA online, that would give us an academic excellence fee of $1,440. So if somebody is doing it as a full-time student, their academic excellence fee would be 44% greater than an in-person student, as opposed to 10%.
But as Dean Haas mentioned, if you look at the total academic excellence fee charged, and the total throughout the entire program would be $5,775, and compared to in the traditional program, it will be $5,150. So that's the.
Is this under a 7-semester part-time MBA assumption?
Fenwick, what is the number of semesters assumption? I think it's 9, right?
9
semesters.
Then where do we obtain this figure of $52.50 from? That equates to 7 semesters. Wouldn't it be $67.50 if it takes 9 semesters?
The 9 is for the online. A student can finish the traditional, depending on their background, in as few as 7.
Okay, so we're talking about the assumption of 7 semesters for a part-time MBA based on that 10%. But if we take into account a full-time student, that 10% is no longer valid. We're looking at a figure of 44% because that $120 per credit would be compounded over their 12 credits of full-time, which would equate to $1,440, where your academic excellence fee for a full-time in-person MBA student is $1,000.
I'm not sure where you're getting 44% from.
I'm equating 1,440 with 1,000.
The academic excellence fee is $750 per term. For the
Unless you're a full-time MBA student, in which case it's 1,000. If we're talking about somebody who's not doing 12 credits, then this discrepancy can go even further.
Right. So I guess the main comparison we are making here, and also the projected audience for this program, and that's why we benchmark this program primarily over the part-time MBA program, which is the much larger program in our case, and our full-time MBA program is actually quite small. So that's why really the sort of apple-to-apple comparison is to the online MBA program versus the part-time MBA program that we currently have, and so all the cost comparison and the fee construction are benchmarked against that. And so the two are actually quite comparable, as I guess you would agree. So that's really I think the more apple-to-apple comparison, given the audience that we're expecting for this particular program.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Then if there's no other question, I'll move the item. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Any further discussion? Any further questions? Hearing none, I'll ask you to respond only if you would like to abstain or oppose.
Wilkin abstain.
Hannon abstain.
Okay. Thank you. This passes. Item 1B, 3B is approved.
Just for the record, trustee Cortez Vasquez has joined us, so for the vote, she will be included.
Thank you. Policy item 1B4A is a resolution to approve the fiscal 2023 operating and capital allocations. And I trust the members have had an opportunity to look at that. The resolution is requesting trustees adopt the appropriated operating budget allocations by campus and program for fiscal year 2023, beginning July 1, 2022, in a total amount of $4.12 billion. The resolution's also requesting the board to adopt the capital budget allocation for projects authorized by the City University Construction Fund to address critical maintenance, infrastructure, and programmatic initiatives in support of the university's mission and America Rescue Plan Act, Minority Serving Institutions Allocation Plan. Interim Chief Financial Officer Christina Chapa will make a brief presentation on this.
Great, thank you. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, thank you. This is going to be 2 of 3, so I appreciate your patience. As Trustee Ferris said, we're going to take you through the proposed allocations for fiscal 23 for both the operating and capital budgets. So we're going to start with the operating budget. And the overall allocations, if you add up all the numbers, we're going to be allocating $4.1 billion. And these numbers are based on the state enacted budget for fiscal 23 and which has already concluded. However, since the community college of cities budget process is still ongoing, at this point in time, as we've done in prior years, we're going to base our allocations on the fiscal 23 executive budget, and if there are any material differences, we will definitely bring them back to the board. And then the final item is really to allocate the funds. So these are the last amounts of funds that we received from the stimulus plans. We'll be allocating that in this budget also. So just to start, so this is our universe of what our budget is. So really what we're talking about here is the state support, and that includes TAP in there as well. That's 281 TAP. We have city support, and then we also have students tuition scholarships and financial aid. Really what that third item entails is that's really our capacity of how much we could generate based on the current budgets in revenue. So that's kind of our starting point there. So if you look at it in a different way, you could see in a pie chart way, you can see that for fiscal 23, the state is providing 53% of our support, the city 15%, and we're potentially generating through student tuition, scholarships, financial aid, which is part of our tuition revenue, about a third, about 32%. And if you look at the uses of those funds, you'll see, again, I'm comparing here fiscal 22 to fiscal 23. You can see both charts. The allocations include about 38% of the funds being allocated directly to senior colleges, about 14% to community colleges. The central managed items, about 33%, and those entail mostly fringe benefits, building rentals, and energy. And I wanted to point out a couple of new items here. One is we also received from the state $40 million that we can be using as one-time strategic investment funds. At this point in the allocation, we have not identified what specifically to use those funds are. So it's sitting there just at $40 million, and the intentions will come back to the board with a plan, hopefully sometime soon. And the second thing I wanted to point out here, we also received a $53 million for a faculty hiring initiative. And about $10 million of that $53 million has already been allocated to the colleges in these plans. About $3.4 million for community colleges and $6.7 million for the senior colleges. A couple other things I just want to mention about both those two new funds is one is they both can be used for both senior and community colleges. And also the $53 million for the faculty hiring is supposed to cover both the salary costs and fringe benefits. Okay, so moving on. So going back to some of the allocations, and if you looked at it, it's a big packet, but if you look at the first page, like 4 to 9 has the summarized data that I'll kind of go through right here. So again, the enacted budget, it was like $2.9 million. We received $234.9 million in additional funding for senior colleges. So in the enacted budget, you'll see that we did an allocation for the TAPGAT fund. We got $59.6 million, and that's been allocated, right? This is new funding, baseline funding for the senior colleges. And those funds were allocated to the colleges based on their actual TAPGAT. Again, I already mentioned the $53 million in full-time faculty, which can be used both senior and community colleges, and about $10 million is included in the plan, with the rest to be allocated at another time. We also received $67.7 million of fringe benefit increases, which have been reflected in these numbers. And as I mentioned, the $40 million in one-time funds are sitting there as a lump sum to be allocated at a different time. I just want to mention a couple of other numbers that are sitting in, that have been allocated in the plan. We also received $4.5 million in additional SEEK money, $1 million additional funding for mental health, and that adds to, we add that, that's now $2 million of baseline fund that we received from the state for mental health for senior colleges. We received $3.6 million of one-time funding as STARP funds for new childcare centers at those colleges that don't have childcare centers, $1 million for nursing program, and some additional money for CUNY leads. And also in the budget, there was, in the state enacted budget, there was also some specific line items for specific programs at colleges, and those were then allocated to those colleges as well. So moving on to the community colleges. And so we received $1.2 billion. We continue to have a PEG reduction of 14.6 million, but the majority of the pandemic related PEG was restored. So we restored $52 million, we're giving back to the colleges. And also the city provided us additional funding for mandatory costs, including collective bargaining and fringes as well. The other thing that I want to mention for community colleges is that we actually, the state funds the community colleges typically per FTE. And because both SUNY and CUNY have been experiencing declines, we're very thankful that we have, that there was a funding floor put for us. So we wouldn't experience additional revenue losses from the state for community colleges. And similar to the senior colleges, we also received some one-time funding for startup childcare costs and some additional funds for college discovery. All of those numbers are reflected in the allocations. And finally, I also want to talk about the federal stimulus funds. As I mentioned, we received an additional $38 million from the American Rescue Plan Act for minority serving institutions. And so we asked the colleges to develop a plan of how they intend to use those funds. Those funds are also required to be used by June 30th. And the colleges' plans mostly include funding for student support and detention, revenue losses, and also eligible pandemic-related expenses. And some of those funds are also going to be used for, if you look at the plan in the packet, for faculty professional development, some student mental health services, and online program development. So later in the agenda today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the third quarter report. So when we get to the third quarter report, which the materials were in your packet, you'll see that, and these numbers are also reflected in the budget, is that there are, structural deficits at some of the colleges, mainly caused by enrollment losses and also one-time pandemic expenses. And, we are projecting that those federal stimulus funds will cover the colleges through fiscal 23, and they end up expiring at the end of fiscal 23 in June. So we're going to be working, with the colleges to work on their financial forecasts and put processes in place to make sure they're financially stable. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the third quarter report. So just moving on to capital, and these were some more detailed in your the last few pages of the budget allocation actually had the capital items. So just a couple of things I want to mention. We received from the state an additional $965.8 million. For community senior colleges, there are additions of $882.2 million, and I have a little breakout of that on the next sheet. We also received community college matching funds from the state, total of $44.8 million, and reimbursements, administrative costs. So the state provides us funding for both us and DASI to funds to administer the capital program. Some good news here is that, you know, we received about 5% more in this budget. That turns out to be like $800,000 more than the prior year. So that was really helpful to take care of some of those cost increases we have. And then finally, we had a reappropriations of $2.7 million. On the city side, you know, so far we have some additional funding. We got about 5 additional borough present money in the budget that was recently released. We expect to get more in the adopted budget from the city, and that's where I understand we get the bulk of the funds from the city and the adopted budget. And just a couple of details on the capital. Again, the details of the different projects are listed in your packets, but we received $344.2 million in infrastructure funding. That was $60 million more than we had been receiving. You know, pretty steadily, we had been receiving about $287 million. $46.9 million of that, which you'll see on page 159 of your packet, has been allocated by college. I think they're using a similar methodology as they have in the past based on enrollment and square footage. The 241.2, I just want to mention there are really 2 pieces of this. There's $181 million that the plan of that will be needs to be approved by the state. And that includes money for things such as HVAC, bathroom upgrades, fire alarms, and things like that. And then there's a $60 million piece that's been allocated towards our new generational financial system. The $56.1 million, those are unified appropriations, and those are typically used for things like health and safety, ADA, equipment, things like that. And finally, we also received an additional $535 million for expansion improvements for the university, and $3 million specifically for the School of Labor and Urban Studies. And that's the total of the 882. On the city side, again, we're going to probably see a lot more in the adopted budget. At this point, we have been allocated $126 million to be used in fiscal 23. And this is really the breakdown, you know, by type of funds. And again, in your packets, you'll see that the detail list of those projects. So those were funded for specific projects mostly. And that's about it. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. Are there any questions on this presentation on the operating and capital allocations? Trustee Berger, Trustee Versani.
I'll pass to Trustee Versani because I think he's going to ask some of the same questions that I would ask.
Okay.
I would say you do it much
Trustee Versani.
better, but I'll bring it up. So when you talked about some of the allocations from the state that were exceptional, you mentioned with the $40 million of one-time funds, there's going to be a process where the plan will be brought back to the board for approval. And we had a request that the $53 million new faculty initiative also be brought back to the board for at least discussion. About $40+ million of that is still to be determined on how it's spent. And when you talk about the triumvirate of structural deficits, new faculty, meaning additional faculty, and replacement faculty, of which we've lost nearly 400 over the last 2 years, that those 3 things don't square or make a triangle very easily. And what we fear as faculty is that there's going to be replacement of full-time tenure track faculty with lecturers unless something's done. And so we'd at least like the opportunity to have a discussion about the priorities on that funding. And it seems that the only way to have that happen would be through the plan being brought back to the board for approval.
Does anyone in the Chancellery wish to respond to that?
Delighted to, if I may.
Chancellor?
clearly, and part of the reason also for the, and remember, the 40 million also package needs to go to OMB at the state for approval, right? So it would require a conversation in this space and then approval there. I want to make sure that we have that clear. One of the reasons why we have not, I mean, we have obviously thought about some categories. We also want to wait what happens with the city budget before we come up with that plan for the board. There's some things in that city budget that might make us rethink some of the categories that we have considered for that 40 million. So I just want to sort of put some context into that. There's a number of ongoing conversations in the city budget. The speaker's proposal, for example, for the program of CUNY Reconnect, right, which could, if it imitates fully the Tennessee model, is money for students to bring them back, right, and then money for our infrastructure to be able to sort of bring the students back, and that'll be part of an investment overall in our enrollment capacity, right? So if some of that funding we get, then on the strategic 40 million, we could do some other things. So that's, I just wanted to sort of explain some of the things that we're waiting for with that other budget that should get clear in the next couple of weeks. On the faculty lines, again, we this board has regarding adjunct faculty, two things that they have sort of charged me with since I came on board. One was to compensate those adjuncts better. We got that done in the collective bargaining agreement that we signed a few months after I became chancellor, and then also to have a less dependence on adjunct faculty teaching our students and have more full-time faculty. The proposal for the 500 lecture lines is precisely targeted at addressing, among other things, that issue. Much less dependence on our campuses for adjuncts, additional colleagues in the department for departmental matters. The reduction in the adjuncts provide added flexibility to department chairs, which will have less transactions, less observations, less things to work on. So that has been the thrust of that initiative, and you know, I will say that I'm proud that we took a step by putting the first 250 in motion, even before we knew what the budget was going to be. We knew this was so important in terms of the board's mandate to try to reduce the number of adjuncts that would allow us to actually have additional teaching power this coming semester in the fall, because we began last year as opposed to waiting to get the budget done and now have to wait an entire year, which is the hiring cycle. And the campuses have flexibility in how they use those lecture lines that we've allocated the first 250 with a methodology that combines looking at faculty ratios on the campuses, student FTEs, and lower division FTEs. We'll be happy to have a conversation as to how the next 250, right? If we need to sort of relook at that formula, happy to have that conversation. Locally, also the general support by the governor, I want to give kudos to her for her support here, would allow us to get those 500 lecturers and about another 100 or so professorial rank faculty, right? So that will be addressing some of the questions that you addressed, Professor Resani, about professorial rank faculty who are not lecturers, right? So we think that that entire packaging, and we are happy, I know Provost Hensel will be happy to have a conversation with the Faculty Senate colleagues on openness for the categories for that hiring process for the professorial rank also. The last thing that I want to also mention is that the fact that we're going to be hiring the lecturers and these professorials too, now that the campuses will also be receiving some additional dollars from the TAP gap for some of those funding spaces that were not allocated before. I think that would allow the campuses to go back in terms of what you would call sort of the more professorial or regular faculty lines that are allocated on the campus. And I'll give you one example, for example, from my previous experience at Queens College, right? I don't know how many lecture lines Queens got as a result of the process, right? But let's say there were 17. I would assume that the college will hire, for example, a number of lecturers in some of the courses that have multiple sections to be able to then, right, replace the adjuncts. So for example, the English department might be getting 3-4 lecturers so they can teach all the sections of 110 and all those things that are normally taught by adjuncts. That means that when the provosts and the deans and the department chairs have the conversation about the faculty lines that were coming through the regular budget process at Queens, there'd be less need, for example, to provide that teaching power to the English department, and then those lines could go to professorial ranks to either replace faculty, like you said, that we have lost, or to make new investments in areas where the college might feel that the enrollment trends might be taking them. So we happy to have a conversation on that, but those are the broad parameters under which we constructed what we have in mind so far.
Is there anyone else? Professor Benton has his hand up. Professor Bazzani has his hand up.
I'd just like to follow up. So 2 points. One, we really wanted to have a conversation not about the 100 lines that were allocated, at least as described to us as cluster hire areas without faculty input. We wanted to have a chance to persuade the Chancellery that given the structural deficits at nearly every single campus, it would be fiscally imprudent to plan on hiring at least until enrollment has recovered. Remember, there's over $100 million in lost tuition revenue throughout the system, and it's not uniformly spread out. We think that when the board had approved the budget request last October or whenever it was, there was 1,075 requested lines, of which half or under half were lecture lines. And here with the new monies from the state, significantly more than half will be allocated to lecture lines, perhaps over 80%. The campuses have a choice, as you said, and I don't disagree with you, but they could choose to hire lecturers and CUNY could direct them to replace full-time faculty. Otherwise, what's going to happen at nearly every single campus, despite the possibility for other things, what will happen is that there will be a supplanting of the full-time faculty lines with lecture lines. And that is something to the detriment of the university going forward. And I would welcome a conversation where we could convince you of that and that we can redirect those funds in a manner that's more consistent with having a university and not simply a teaching college.
Okay. Trustee Berger and then Professor Benton.
So I'm still a little confused, but maybe, following on what the Chancellor said, Professor Bazzani provided us some information that indicated that 400 full-time faculty lines have been lost over the last couple of years. Does the current budget provide for backfilling all or any of those? And is any part of the $53 million we're getting from the state intended to backfill those lines? Or are we even going to backfill those lines?
Those would be campus decision, Trustee Berger, right? There's no reason why the lecture lines cannot go towards the replacement of those faculty. So you have the funds for that. You're going to have a chance to hire also professorial faculty as a result of the new investment that the governor provided the university, and happy to engage in a conversation about maximum flexibility to the campus on that. as Trustee Versani has said. And then there's additional money going to the campuses, right? And then we'll be able to use that in the regular process of refilling some of those lines on the campuses, right? So this provides the most flexible set of circumstances for the campus to be able to look at how to fill those lines. But the emphasis, right, on the lecture lines is to particularly respond to a concern that this board has expressed about the fact that we have overly reliance on faculty teaching, right? And this investment would be historic in maybe moving the university from a situation where we have 64% part-time faculty to 36 to more than 50-50 mix, right? So we feel that this comprehensive approach is the best way to replenish regular professorial faculty, to create additional teaching capacity on the campuses. I like to remind our colleagues that our lecturers are full-time faculty members, right? They're full department members, and they participate in the life of the university also. So I don't know if that clarifies the situation for you, Trustee Berger, but that's the current plan provides that flexibility.
That's helpful. A related question is, in our community colleges where we've had significant shortfalls on enrollment, how are faculty affected by that? For example, at Kingsborough College, where we're down by more than a third, has faculty been reduced? Have we reduced the number of adjuncts? Have we reduced the number of sections? How do we respond to the loss of enrollment, particularly at the community colleges?
Well, I mean, again, I'll take a shot of that. I think it's been in a combination of ways, right? We have been tighter on the hire of faculty, right? Both adjunct and full time, to the point of having lost some faculty members. I would imagine that it has been mostly on the adjunct budget, right, where you have some flexibility in terms of the number of sections that were taught. That it'd be probably less sections because of having less students enrolled.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, maintaining professorial and full-time ranks are, of course, a priority. And I hope as the colleges consider this, I'm sure that's in their minds also. I have one question on the capital budget. If the city allocates $126 million in this year's budget, does that require the state to match that in next year's budget?
It would be if it's for a senior college project. So yes, so there is a lag.
But the city, most of the city allocation is for community college capital needs. Isn't the state obligated to match that also?
They do, my understanding is they do a 50% match on the senior college projects.
No, community.
Sorry. God, you're there. Thank you, Gwen.
All right.
Sorry about that. All right, so sorry, there's your answer.
I'm sorry. So I'm not sure I got that. So on the senior college, it's a full match. On the community colleges, it's a 50% match. Am I understanding it correctly?
Gwen, can you clarify?
No, there's no match for senior colleges. There's only a match of 50% for community colleges, so 50-50.
Thank you.
Professor Benton.
Thank you. The governor's plan proposed the 53 million to include the hiring of 340 additional faculty members. Would we want to be reporting to the state that we actually didn't hire 340 additional faculty members, but instead we just offset the 383 that we've lost since fall of 19. I'm concerned about that. The other is that some campuses between fall of 19 have maintained the same number of faculty, and other campuses have dropped faculty by like 30, 40 positions. When we decide how to allocate these positions, are we going to be rewarding campuses for not maintaining the positions that they had?
So let me say a couple of things. Again, I'm not too sure where the 340 number comes from, right? My understanding, and again, Christina, feel free to chime in, or Hector, is that we have 53 million to hire new faculty. And the program that we are proposing will include 500 full-time faculty, lecturers, and then another 100 or so, depending on how we end up doing the math, professorial rank, assistant, associate, or full professors there. So we actually will be getting at least about 600 new full-time faculty of different ranks with that investment of 53 million, which what we consider to be historic and important. In addition to that, the money going to the campuses as a result of the filling in the hole with the TAP gap, right? The additional money that we get from the fringe, right? Things that in the past were costs that we were eating, right? Those are going to be available on the campuses for additional investments of staffing of all sorts that would undoubtedly include faculty, right? And I would imagine that at that level, it will be mostly professorial rank faculty. So I think that that provides a complement of significant investment in all kinds of full-time faculty moving forward. So that's, again, and that's in terms of the numbers. The formula, at least for the allocation for the lecturer lines, right, was particularly taking into account things that what you described. It's a combination of both student to faculty ratios, student FTEs, and also lower division FTEs to be able to, again, and as you know, a very complex, right? Any way you cut those things, there's going to be campuses that would receive more or less. We're trying not to reward that, and again, trying to create the highest teaching capacity, and we'll be delighted to revise, particularly for the next cohort of the 250 lecturers. If there's some additional tweaking there based on some of that insight, we're open to that conversation very much so.
Okay. Professor Benton, did that answer your question?
Not completely. Would it be possible that we could see the actual formulas that were used in the lecturer allocation? Those weren't presented to in general. I mean, the faculty couldn't see them for the university until late May. And what we were provided showed the numbers and showed sentences, words about the principles that were involved, but we've never actually seen the allocation formulas. And so we're not really in a position to offer the suggestions about tweaks because we don't know what the metrics are that we would be tweaking. So could we see those metrics?
Absolutely, absolutely. No
Okay,
issue.
that's your answer. Professor Trustee Verzani.
2 points. One, I want to clarify to those who are confused the distinction between full-time faculty as the chancellor is using it and tenure track faculty as is typically used within the in higher ed. Lecturers do not have the full privileges as the chancellor indicated within the bylaws. In fact, lecturers can't serve as department chairpersons. They can't serve on appointments committees. They can't function in the terms of status of faculty the way that other full-time tenure track faculty can. And so I want to make sure that's clear to those who don't the nuance gets lost because it comes very quickly. But more importantly, I had put in a request that this particular plan come back to the board for discussion along with the monies for the 40 million. And I'm wondering if there's going to be any discussion of that, not just communication going forward, but an actual return to the board with the plan.
Chancellor, do you want to
So,
respond?
I mean, again, I obviously will do whatever the board desires, right? And I don't mind having the conversations on the faculty hiring allocation. I would recommend that we have the conversation. I also believe also that the matter of the consultation can have an impact on the capacity to get into the hiring cycle fast enough too. We're trying to get some of the things done so we can give guidance to the department so they can hit the ground running in the fall, so we can hire the people in the hiring cycle. So those are concerns that I have about the coming back and voting on the details of a formula on the faculty lines. I think that the general principles of policy are consistent with what this board has charged as chancellery to think about in again trying to get less dependent on adjunct faculty. But again, happy to engage the faculty senate and show the formula and get some feedback for the next 250. The 150 already in the hiring process, and on the professorial ones too.
Okay, thank you. I think we're, if there's nothing else, we're ready for to decide this item. I'll move it. Is there a second?
Berger seconds.
Okay, this is item 1B4A. If there's nothing else, we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose.
Berzani abstain.
Hannon abstain.
Okay. Item 1B4A is approved with 2 abstentions. Thank you. There's nothing else on the policy calendar, and there is section 2 information items. Information item 3A is the FY22 third quarter financial report, and 3B is the fiscal matters information report. Christina Chappell will provide insight in both. They do not require a vote.
Do you want me to go through? I had some slides prepared. Should I go through those?
Of course, we haven't been tortured enough.
Okay, I will try to be as quick as possible. Okay, so the third quarter report, let's take you through a couple of slides. So I think we've talked about this before. For this year, you'll see that we're going to be ending in a positive position. It's really mostly because of these federal stimulus funds that we have that run out next fiscal year. While we've had some public funding reductions for 2023, the outlook does look much more promising. And our biggest, I think, challenge right now is really our loss of enrollment and tuition revenue. So we're projected to end the fiscal year with $110 million in our reserves. That number was about $103 million during the second quarter, and I'll show you some details on that. Again, college by college, there are wide variations of financial health. And again, really a lot of that's dictated on how those colleges are doing in terms of enrollments and tuition revenue. So this is kind of just a high level projected. You'll see our resources and where our expenditures are. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I'll go through those a little bit more on the upcoming slides. So not the prettiest picture, but here you'll see the $110 million. And if you recall from Q2, there were 2 colleges who were in the red. All the colleges are projected to be positive at this point. The one thing I think I said a lot when I went over the Q2 report, the mid-year report, was really that we tend to be pretty conservative at this point. And a lot of these numbers look better because, some of our projections, our expenditure projections have now come down a bit lower. So I just wanted to point that out.
And of course, the federal stimulus money in whatever form or fashion filled a great many budget holes.
It certainly did. So we're projected to use about 294 of those stimulus funds this year. The colleges have budgeted, of that 294, the colleges have budgeted to use about $6 million in their expenses, and the remainder really is lost revenue. So again, we're using a lot of the stimulus funds, particularly on the community colleges side, to really backfill the revenue losses that we receive for both enrollment and tuition revenue losses. And we're also incurring additional pandemic-related expenses, such as vaccine testing, and reopening costs. And also some colleges, and Lehman was the example you could see, are also are able to make some investments with some of this federal stimulus funds. So if you look at enrollment and you compare where we are fall to fall, you'll see that we are, sorry, I'm just trying to move over the pictures. We're down 9% overall, university-wide, and you see the largest decreases are at community colleges. Tuition revenue compared to last year, we're down by $111.2 million. You can see there's, big changes at both senior colleges and community colleges. And if you compare, so while our expenses came down, you'll see that between Q2 and Q3, we have additional information on spring enrollment now for this Q3 report. And so the tuition projections that we had for this fiscal year have gone down on another $23 million based on the spring enrollments. Just looking quickly at community colleges and senior colleges and the ranges there, you'll see that senior colleges are, there's pretty big ranges between, there's one college has a decrease of $12.9 million, while another one has an increase of 3.4. Mostly on the senior colleges, I think that comprehensives have definitely suffered in a similar way that community colleges have. And again, a range of percentage-wise is negative 15% to 2% increase. Community colleges are all down. And again, the revenue losses range really from a little over $1 million to about $25 million. Graduate professional schools are mostly steady overall. So moving on to expenses and staffing, like I mentioned before, our overall expenses are projected to increase by about 7% since if you compare us to last fiscal year. But we're showing here in this report a decrease from the Q2 of about $38 million. PS costs, although we're down a lot, if you looked at our staffing numbers, those expenses are projected to increase mostly because of collective bargaining costs and salary increments. Those costs for Q3 were about $10 million less. That projection has come down about $10 million since the Q2. On the OTPS side, again, we're projected to have about a 51% increase, $150 million from last fiscal year. A large portion of that is really some of these fiscal, these pandemic related costs related to both those investments and also to cover the masks and the testing and the like. And that projection has come down by about $28 million from the second quarter. Moving on to staffing, as I showed before, we were down about 833 positions if you compare the fall 2020 to the spring 22. And that certainly has helped keep the PS costs, although they are increasing not by as much. Okay. And then just moving on to, I don't want to repeat this too much because I think I had a little bit on this slide, but really, I guess the point here is that, thanks to the governor and the mayor, we definitely have some additional funds that will be allocated to the colleges, in fiscal 23. Not going to solve all our problems, right? But hopefully that will help provide some financial stability for the colleges. So I think that concludes, I'm going to stop sharing. And that concludes that report.
Okay. Is there any member of the committee wishes to trust?
I'm looking at these numbers and, we're being told we're using $288 million of federal funds this year to deal with revenue losses. And we're getting additional money from the city, additional money from the state, and we're spending it all. And at the end of 23, we fall off a cliff. The $288 million that's being used to cover revenue losses just isn't there anymore. We've been talking about structural deficits for quite a long time now. We keep saying, yes, there's a structural deficit. We get more money from the city and the state and we spend it. No guarantees for next year, other than saying, yes, we're aware of it and we're going to look at it. What definitive plans are there to deal with what's going to be a huge revenue loss next year? Or do we just fall off the cliff?
Would anyone like to take a shot at that? Because that was going to be my exit question.
Sorry.
Christina, why don't you?
A couple things, and then I know there will be some additions to me. So I wanted to just make a quick point about the $294 million that we're using in federal funds this year. So absolutely big number, right? No doubt. Some of that number relates to about 60 million, at least at this point, project about 60 million of that relates to these investment kind of a pandemic related costs that we have. And then also the other thing that I just want to mention briefly is that what's kind of buried there in a little bit is the CUNY comeback. I know money, which is like a little technical thing. So as you know, we did a big debt forgiveness program, and that was about $100 million. And so that money is being showed as federal stimulus money and not tuition and fee money. So I would say that some of the revenue projections are not what are kind of covered a little bit about that. So the problem is thankfully not as bad as it seems initially. And other people took it off.
Did you want to take a crack at answering Trustee Berger's question?
You ask it?
Yeah. Well, Hector, go and then I'll go.
Sure. So Trustee Berger, one of the things that we're looking at is we're working to bring on a consultant to work with us to continue to look at the different challenges that we have when it comes to 2024. And wrapped within that is to really continue to work with us on sort of our continuing enrollment challenges, to really put together a real comprehensive plan that will then be sort of presented to the board, right? With sort of direct action items, because I think your point is well taken, right? That there is the 2024, and so we're working on doing that. I think part of that is sort of looking at the different schools and sort of how we got there and what are the different things connected. I mean, some of it's connected obviously to the enrollment challenges, but some of it's connected to sort of how the schools are looking at the staffing and some of those savings that we were able to realize due to the pandemic, and sort of begin to really put together, come to the board with a real comprehensive plan. It's not going to have one sort of solution, but multiple solutions to be able to address the very important point that you're raising. So clearly something that we are really focused on, and something that we will be coming back to you with a presentation and a plan.
So let me add a couple of things to what Christina and Hector mentioned. Clearly, we're working and we created the sort of separated the office for the vice chancellor for program manager, because we want someone focused on that work. It's something that we've talked with this board about. And there's some things that we are immediately jumping at, particularly in the community college sector, which is where we have had the largest enrollment losses over the last number of years, right? And the additional feedback that we get from the consultant will help us in that process. But so that is one area. There are initiatives like the CUNY Reconnect, which is the program that was proposed by the speaker, which is consistent with some of the things that we have been identifying, which is to go not just to our more traditional DOE pipeline, right, which has been our main source of students, but tap into that market of individuals out there who have some college but have not completed a degree, right? And there's an entire market for those individuals, and the CUNY Reconnect would actually allow us to move even more quickly into that space. And we're not sure exactly where the funding is going to end in the city budget, but that's money that's going to have money for our capacity to beef up our enrollment machine, but also is going to provide money for the students to create incentives for them to come back, and then they can be supplemented with additional forms of financial aid, TAP, Pell, or the fundraising from the schools. We are working particularly with some of those colleges that have some of the more on the edge balances, to be careful about moving forward with spending plans. We're also doing that with all the campuses, right? Because the improved budget scenario is clearly welcome news, right? But we need to be careful moving forward. The other part of the work is for us to continue to lobby the city and the state so that we go into cycles of funding that are more predictable and sustained, to allow us to not to be in a similar scenario. And we also need to keep then some of the fiscal discipline that we navigated when we're dealing with the pandemic, right? Not lose some of those lessons. And I think the balance of those three things should give us a road forward.
Do we do a 4-year financial plan? Do we look forward? So when we go to our funding partners, we can say, here's where we are now, and here's why we're looking for this now and this next year and this the following year? Or is this always just a year-to-year thing?
So, Trustee Berger, I think that's it's the direction that we're moving. As I discussed with the chair of fiscal, the first plan was to combine both the operating and capital budget. And now the next phase of it is we're moving into a 4-year funding, because I think you're right. I think it is the only way that you as board members and us as leaders at the university should be looking at the budget. You know, where the problem is, where we have challenges, so we can begin to do some better planning. And I think it's something that the university as a whole has not done, right? And I think it's something that is important, but we have to do it across the system. I think one of the things that the chancellor has said is that we're taking this period to really do the proper planning to make sure that it gets implemented. I think when you try to implement a strategy like this in a system as complex as ours, you got to make sure you put everything sort of in place. I mean, in some ways, it doesn't move as quickly as I would like, but I think it is the right way for us to sort of look at our budget situation sort of going forward. And I think it's something that you're going to see in the next phase of what we're going to be presenting, connected to the operating and capital budget.
Thank you. This is helpful. Let's continue these discussions, Mr. Chair, going forward.
Absolutely my intention, trustee. Anyone else? In that case, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Before everybody jumps off, I just want to, we're just delayed. So the next meeting, the 5:30, that was governance, is going to start now, and that will delay, and that's a very quick meeting. It's not a long meeting. And then FSA, Lorraine, will probably start about 6:15, okay? And then student. So thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
See you with governance. Bye.
We still need the motion.